nations that hate us to go to Cuba, to go to Iran, and to let them use those billions of dollars to try to murder us.
Well, if Ted was listening, he would have heard me say something very similar. I said we would not do the deal unless it was going to be a very good deal for us. And I think I said it loud, and I think I said it very clear. And I think after 50 years, and I have many friends, I own many properties in Miami, many, and I have many people that know and they feel exactly the way I do. And make a deal, it would be great, but it's got to be a great deal for the United States, not a bad deal for the United States. As far as Iran is concerned, I would have never made that deal. That is one of the worst deals ever made by this country. It is a disaster. So for Ted to say, I agree with that deal, I mean, it's a staple in my speeches that may be the worst single deal I've ever seen negotiated. So don't try and put it on me like it's wonderful, like I love it.
Senator Cruz, your response?
Well, look, I'll point out, first of all, it is a matter of public record that Donald supported John Kerry in 2004 over George W. Bush, and he supported Hillary Clinton, gave her 2 checks in her presidential campaign in 2008, and indeed, once she was Secretary of State, he described her as one of the greatest Secretary of States in history. And, you know, the point on the Iran deal, his answer to everything is if only someone smarter were in government, things would be better. No, we don't just need smarter people in government. We need leaders that are protecting American interests. And when it comes to Iran, Donald has said he would leave the agreement in place and try to renegotiate it, giving the Ayatollah Khamenei over $100 billion. That reflects you do not understand the radical Islamic terrorist that is the Ayatollah that wants to murder us. We need a commander-in-chief that understands our enemies, understands and doesn't give them billions of dollars to threaten our safety and security.
I was against the giving of the money at all costs. I said don't negotiate at all until you get the prisoners back. If the prisoners don't come back early, 3 years ago, one of the longest negotiations I've ever seen, by the way. If they don't come back early, I was saying don't negotiate. They come back early. What you do is you take it back and you say either give us the prisoners or we double up the sanctions. And what we should have done is doubled up the sanctions and made a much better deal, because that deal is a disaster. Ted, the money is largely gone because of incompetent and very poor negotiators. But that money, $150 billion, is largely gone and already spent everywhere.
Thank you, Mr. Trump. Let's refocus this back on Cuba. Governor Kasich, a pair of entrepreneurs from Alabama and North Carolina have just received approval to build the first U.S. factory in Cuba, making tractors for small farms. This is a direct result of President Obama's new policy in Cuba that we've been talking about. If you are elected president, would you encourage more U.S. companies to do business like that in Cuba?
No, I wouldn't. Listen, I think the problem with the administration, if you talk to our friends around the world, they say, what is America doing? You know, you don't support us. We can't figure out where you are. You won't arm the freedom fighters in Ukraine. We let the Russians trump up some excuse on the business of, Russian-speaking people. You had a red line in Syria. You walked away from it. You refused to fund the Syrian rebels. You undercut Egypt, and we ended up with the Muslim Brotherhood for a while. And then we turn our back at Netanyahu when he comes to Congress to talk about his concerns of the Iranian deal. Look, I know in human nature sometimes there's a sense that you make better with your enemies than you do with your friends. And you know what happens when you do that? You make a terrible mistake. You need to support your friends. You need to hold your enemies out here, and you need to negotiate tough deals. The fact is, they need to understand who we are. The Chinese understand. They don't own the South China Sea. They have to stop hacking everything we have in this country, or we'll take out their systems. We will arm the Ukrainians so that they have lethal defensive aid. We will destroy ISIS. And Mr. Putin, you better understand, you're either with us or you're against us. We're not rattling a sword. You're not our enemy, but we're not going to put up with this nonsense any longer. And a strong America is what the entire world is begging for. Where has America gone? Is what many of our allies say around the world. I'm president, they're going to know exactly where we are, because we're coming back.
Thank you, Governor. While we're discussing issues of importance to Floridians, I reached out to the Republican mayor of Miami, Tomas Regalado, to find out what he wanted to hear from you this evening. Mayor Regalado told me, quote, climate change means rising ocean levels, which in South Florida means flooding downtown and in our neighborhoods. It's an everyday reality in our city. Will you as president, acknowledge the reality of the scientific consensus about climate change, and as president, will you pledge to do something about it, unquote. Senator Rubio, the Miami mayor, has endorsed you. Will you honor his request for a pledge and acknowledge the reality of the scientific consensus of climate change and pledge to do something about
The
it?
climate is changing, and one of the reasons why the climate is changing is because the climate is always changing. There has never been a time when the climate has not changed. I think the fundamental question for a policymaker is the climate changing because of something we are doing, and if so, is there a law you can pass to fix it? So on the issue of flooding in Miami, it's caused by two things. Number one, South Florida is largely built on land that was once a swamp. And number two, because if there is higher sea levels or whatever it may be happening, we do need to deal with that through mitigation, and I have long supported mitigation efforts. But as far as a law that we can pass in Washington to change the weather, there's no such thing. On the contrary, there is laws they want us to pass. There are laws they want us to pass that would be devastating for our economy. Or these programs like what the president's put in with the Clean Power Act, or all these sorts of things that he's forcing down our throat on the war on coal. Let me tell you who's going to pay the price of that. Americans are going to pay the price of that. The cost of doing that is going to be rammed down the throat of the American consumer, the single parent, the working family who are going to see increases in the cost of living, the businesses who are going to leave America because it's more expensive to do business here than anywhere else. And you know what passing those laws would have, what impact they would have on the environment? Zero. Because China is still going to be polluting and India is still going to be polluting at historic levels. So I am in favor of a clean environment. My children live in South Florida. My family's being raised here. I want this to be a safe and clean place, but these laws some people are asking us to pass will do nothing for the environment, and they will hurt and devastate our economy.
So just to clarify, Senator Rubio, Mayor Regalado, when he talks about the reality of the scientific consensus about climate change, the Republican mayor of Miami, he's saying the scientific consensus is that man does contribute to climate change. When you talk to him, because he is the mayor of Miami and he has endorsed you, you tell him that he's wrong?
I would say to him that there is no law that they want us to pass that would have any impact on that. If you took the gift list of all of these groups that are asking us to pass these laws and did every single one of them, there would be no change in our environment. Sea level would still rise. All these other things that are happening would continue to go on for a lot of different reasons. One, because America is not a planet. It's a country. And number two, because these other countries like India and China are more than making up in carbon emission for whatever we could possibly cut. Here's what he will immediately, and Mayor Regalado is a great mayor and a good friend, but here's what he's immediately going to start hearing from. He will immediately start hearing from families in South Florida who are barely making it by, and now their electric bill went up $20 or $30 a month. Because we just made it more expensive to generate power.
Thank you, Senator.
That cost will be passed on to working families. I am not going to destroy the U.S. economy for a law that will do nothing for our environment.
Governor Kasich, what would you say to the mayor of Miami?
Well, I do believe we contribute to climate change, but I don't think it has to be either you're for some environmental stringent rules or you're not going to have any jobs. The fact is you can have both. In our state, we've reduced emissions by 30%. But let me tell you also what we're trying to do. We want all the sources of energy. We want to dig coal, but we want to clean it when we burn it. We believe in natural gas. We believe in nuclear power. And you know what else I believe in? I happen to believe in solar energy, wind energy, efficiency. Renewables matter. Now, it doesn't mean because you pursue a policy of being sensitive to the environment, because we don't know how much humans actually contribute, but it is important we develop renewables. A battery technology can unleash an entirely different world. So the fact is that you can have a strong environmental policy at the same time that you have strong economic growth. They are not inconsistent with one another.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Cruz, I want to talk a little bit right now about how you gentlemen see the world. Senator Cruz, Colin Powell this week said that the nasty tone of this presidential election is hurting the image of the U.S. abroad. He said, quote, foreigners of the world looking at this are distressed. Does it matter to you what the rest of the world thinks of the United States?
Of course it does. And we've seen for 7 years a president that has made the presidency and has made, sadly, his administration a laughingstock in the world. This administration started with President Obama sending back the bust of Winston Churchill to the United Kingdom within the opening weeks. Then he proceeded to go on a worldwide apology tour, apologizing for the United States' of America. Our friends and allies quickly learned America could not be counted on. I'll tell you, when I travel abroad, when I meet with heads of states and defense ministers and foreign ministers, they say over and over again, it is hard to be friends with America. We can't count on America. America doesn't stand with us. And that is a disgrace. But the good news is, Jake, we've seen this before. We have seen a weak Democratic president undermine the military, weaken our readiness, weaken our respect in the world with Jimmy Carter. And in January 1981, Ronald Reagan came into office, and that can change overnight. It's worth remembering, Iran released our hostages the day Ronald Reagan was sworn into office. And America needs a president who stands with our friends and allies, as I will do, and who stands up and demonstrates strength to our enemies. That's why on day one, I will rip to shreds this catastrophic Iranian nuclear deal, because the Ayatollah Khamenei must never be allowed to acquire nuclear weapons.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Trump, some of your Republican critics have expressed concern about comments you have made praising authoritarian dictators. You have said positive things about Putin as a leader and about China's massacre of pro-democracy protesters at Tiananmen Square. You said, quote, when the students poured into Tiananmen Square, the Chinese government almost blew it. Then they were vicious, they were horrible, but they put it down with strength. That shows you the power of strength. How do you respond
That doesn't mean I was endorsing that. I was not endorsing it. I said that is a strong, powerful government that put it down with strength, and they kept down the riot. It was a horrible thing. It doesn't mean at all I was endorsing it. As far as Putin is concerned, I think Putin's been a very strong leader for Russia, but he's been a lot stronger than our leader, that I can tell you. I mean, for Russia. That doesn't mean I'm endorsing Putin.
But the word strong, obviously, is a compliment. And many people would look at what the Chinese leaders have done and what Putin is doing as atrocities.
I used to think Merkel was a great leader until she did what she did to Germany. Germany is a disaster right now, so I used to think that. And strong doesn't mean good. Putin is a strong leader, absolutely. I could name many strong leaders. I could name very many very weak leaders, but he is a strong leader. Now, I don't say that in a good way or a bad way. I say it as a fact.
Governor Kasich, when you were a member of Congress, you were outspoken about the Tiananmen Square massacre. What do you think?
I think that the Chinese government butchered those kids. And when that guy stood in front of that young man stood in front of that tank, we ought to build a statue of him over here when he faced down the Chinese government. Now, I will tell you, I don't believe that we need to make China an enemy. They're a competitor. But I want to go back to three things they should do. We should have the heat on them to work in North Korea to get rid of that guy and the things that he's doing, number one. Number two, they need to realize they don't own the South China Sea. And I will compliment the administration for sending some carrier battle group into the South China Sea. And thirdly, when it comes to the issue of cyber attacks, we're going to have to beef up the cyber command. And they need to understand that if you attack us, we will defend ourselves, everything, including our grid. But if you do it, we have the capability to take out your systems. The president has not given the Cyber Command that authority. I will. And when it comes to trade, I will tell you this. They can't manipulate their currency. That will not be anything that I would allow them to get away with. And if I saw them doing it, I would take immediate action to make sure that the American worker is protected.
Thank you, Governor Kasich. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we'll have more of the Republican presidential debate from Miami, Florida, right after this. Stay with us. Welcome back to the CNN Republican presidential debate in Miami, Florida. Mr. Trump, I want to start with you in this block. Earlier today, a man was arrested and charged with assault after sucker punching a protester in the face at your rally in Fayetteville, North Carolina. This is hardly the first incident of violence breaking out at one of your rallies. Today, Hillary Clinton, your potential general election opponent, clearly indicated she sees this as an issue for the campaign. She said, quote, "This kind of behavior is repugnant. We set the tone for our campaigns. We should encourage respect, not violence." Do you believe that you've done anything to create a tone where this kind of violence would be encouraged?
I hope not. I truly hope not. I will say this. We have 25, 30,000 people. You've seen it yourself. People come with tremendous passion and love for the country. And when they see protest, in some cases, you know, you're mentioning one case, which I haven't seen. I heard about it, which I don't like. But when they see what's going on in this country, they have anger that's unbelievable. They have anger. They love this country. They don't like seeing bad trade deals. They don't like seeing higher taxes. They don't like seeing a loss of their jobs, where our jobs have just been devastated. And I know, I mean, I see it. There is some anger. There's also great love for the country. It's a beautiful thing in many respects, but I certainly do not condone that at all, Jake.
Some of your critics point to quotes that you've made at these rallies, including February 23rd, "I'd like to punch him in the face," referring to a protester. February 27th, "In the good old days, they'd have ripped him out of that seat so fast." February 1st, "Knock the crap out of him, would you? Seriously, okay, just knock the hell. I promise you, I will pay for the legal fees. I promise, I promise."
We have some protesters who are bad dudes. They have done bad things. They are swinging, they are really dangerous, and they get in there and they start hitting people. And we had a couple big, strong, powerful guys doing damage to people. Not only the loudness I don't mind, but doing serious damage. And if they're going to be taken out, I be honest, I mean, we have to run something. And it's not me. It's usually the municipal government, the police, because I don't have guards all over these stadiums. I mean, we fill up stadiums. It's usually the police. And by the way, speaking of the police, we should pay our respects to the police, because they are taking tremendous abuse of this country, and they do a phenomenal job. So we should truly give our police, they're incredible people, we should give them a great deal more respect than they receive.
Senator Cruz, are you concerned at all that these kinds of scenes potentially hurt the Republican Party for the general election?
Listen, I think for every one of us, we need to show respect to the people. We need to remember who it is we're working for. You know, we've seen for 7 years a president who believes he's above the law, who behaves like an emperor, who it is all about him, and he forgot that he's working for the American people. Let me ask, turn the camera out here. How many of y'all feel disrespected by Washington? Washington isn't listening to the people. And that's the frustration that is boiling over. And we need to nominate and elect a president who remembers he works for the people. You know, at Donald's rallies recently, he's taken to asking people in the crowd to raise their hand and pledge their support to him. Now, I got to say, to me, I think that's exactly backwards. This is a job interview. We are here pledging our support to you, not the other way around. And the only hand-raising that I'm interested in doing is on January 20th, 2017, raising my hand with my left hand on the Bible and pledging to the American people to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Mr. Trump, if you'd like to respond.
It shows the total dishonesty of the press. We were having, on a few occasions, again, massive crowds, and we're talking, and I'm saying, who's going to vote on Tuesday? Who's going to vote? Place goes crazy. Then I say, hey, do me a favor. Raise your right hand. Do you swear you're going to vote for Donald Trump? Everyone's laughing. We're all having a good time. And, you know, that's why I have much bigger crowds than Ted, because we have a good time at my time. But we're all having a good time. And the next day on the Today Show, and a couple of other places, not too many, because when you look at it, everyone's smiling, laughing, their arms are raised like this. They had pictures, still pictures, of people and they tried to equate it to Nazi Germany. It is a disgrace. It was a total disgrace. And I've had reporters, people that you know, come up to me and said that what they did on the Today Show was a disgrace.
Governor Kasich, do you worry about the scenes of violence in some of these rallies affecting the Republican Party's chances in November?
Well, I worry about the violence at a rally, period. I mean, it's, elections are important, but the unity of this country really matters. Jake, here is what I think is happening. There are people out there who are worried about their jobs. They're worried that somebody's going to come in and tell them they're out of work and they're 54 years old and they don't know where they're going to get another job, a man and a woman. Maybe they're worried about a trade deal. They're worried about the fact that their wages haven't gone up. They're worried that their kids went to college and the promise was you go to college, you get a job, things are going to be great. They went to college, they rang up debt, and they're still living in their parents' basement. People are uptight. Our seniors are worried they're going to lose their Social Security. There's two ways to treat it. You can either prey on that and be negative about it, or you can tell people that these things can be fixed. If we're Americans rather than Republicans and Democrats, we get together, we can solve all of these problems. We can provide financial security, we can drive the wages up, we can get kids jobs with a more robust economy. And you know what? They want to help solve these problems right where they live, and I'll give them the power to do it.
Senator Rubio, I know you want to say something.
I do. A couple points. The first is I'm concerned about violence in general in this society. And by the way, the first people that are facing that violence are our law enforcement officers. And they deserve our respect, and they deserve our thanks for they deserve our thanks for everything they do for us. On the issue of anger, yes, people are angry. Of course they're angry. Every institution in America has been failing us for the better part of 20 or 30 years. But leadership is not about using the anger. The leadership is about using the anger to motivate us, not to define us, but to motivate us to take action. Being here in Miami is special. My grandfather lived with us most of our life, most of his life while I was growing up. And he would sit in the porch of our home and tell me all kinds of stories and things I learned about history. My grandfather was born in 1899 before there were airplanes in the sky. One night in the summer of 1969, he watched a man set foot on the moon. You know what he said when he saw that? He said, "Americans can do anything. Americans can do anything. There is no problem before us we cannot solve, and we can solve it if we come together in a serious way in this generation and embrace all of the principles that made us great to begin with."
Thank you, Senator. The math suggests that it's possible that not one of you will reach the magic number of 1,237 delegates before the Republican convention, which would mean a contested convention. Let's go back to Salem Radio's Hugh Hewitt.
Thank you, Jake. Governor Kasich, the math and the map say you can only become the nominee if, in fact, there is a contested convention. If we arrive on the shores of Lake Erie, Donald Trump has the most delegates. Why shouldn't the person with the most delegates, even if it's not a majority of delegates, be the nominee?
Well, first of all, let's not, the math doesn't tell the whole story in politics. The great thing about politics, the reason why we watch it is because what's true today is not necessarily true tomorrow. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. Secondly, look, when you went to school up there in Salem, Ohio, okay, if you got an 86, you got a B. Because everybody else had an 84 didn't mean you got an A. So you just have to win enough delegates to be the nominee. And frankly, I don't know if we're going to get at a convention like that, but if we do, I was at one in 1976 as a wee lad and supported Ronald Reagan and actually worked directly with him. He tried valiantly. He lost. Gerald Ford won. The party was united. Gerald Ford served the country great by pardoning Richard Nixon. He lost the election probably because of that, but he put America first. And we were healed as a party. So, look, you have to earn the delegates in order to be picked, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. We don't know what's going to happen because we still have about half the delegates to be selected. And that's what's going to be a very interesting thing to see how it all turns out as we move forward over the next couple weeks.
Thank you, Governor. Mr. Trump, if you arrive in Cleveland with a plurality and the most, but not a majority, is it legitimate for someone else to emerge from that convention, the nominee, and if so, would you support that person?
I think that what should happen, getting back maybe a little bit to your first question, I think that whoever, first of all, I think I'm going to have the delegates, okay? I think. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. But if somebody doesn't have the delegates, and I guess there's two of us up here that can, and there are two of us that cannot at this moment. But if no, that's, by the way, that is not meant to be a criticism. That's just a mathematical fact, okay? If two of us get up there, I would say this. If Marco If Ted had more votes than me in the form of delegates, I think whoever gets to that top position, as opposed to solving that artificial number that was set by somebody, which is a very random number, I think that whoever gets the most delegates should win. That's what I think.
Senator Cruz, if you overtake Donald Trump at the convention, what will you do to take his very passionate supporters and keep them from bolting the convention and sabotaging the fall election?
Well, look, there's some folks in Washington. Donald, you are welcome to be president of the Smithsonian. You know, there's some in Washington who are having fevered dreams of a brokered convention. They're unhappy with how the people are voting, and they want to parachute in their favored Washington candidate to be the nominee. I think that would be an absolute disaster, and we need to respect the will of the voters. It's one of the reasons why in the course of this election, listen, everyone up here has worked very, very hard, but Donald is right. There are only two of us that have a path to winning the nomination, Donald and myself. At this point, I have roughly 360 delegates. He has about 100 more than I have. We have at this point beaten Donald in 8 separate states all over the country, geographically, from Maine to Alaska, from Kansas to Texas, all over this country. We have beaten him. And so for the people at home, if you're one of the 65–70% of Republicans who recognizes that if we nominate Donald Trump, Hillary wins. That's why the media wants him to be the nominee so much. If you recognize that, then I want to invite you, if you've supported other candidates, come and join us. We are seeing candidates coming together and uniting. It's why Carly Fiorina endorsed me yesterday. It's why Mike Lee endorsed me today. I ask everyone to come together. Let's stand together and let's beat Hillary Clinton in November.
Thank you, Mr. Trump, then to Senator Rubio.
You know, I listen and I watch Ted on television, and when he speaks, and he's always saying, I'm the only one that beat Donald in 6 contests, and I beat him. But I beat him in 13 contests. He never mentions that. And let me just tell you another little fact, little minor fact. I have about 1,600,000 votes during this primary season, more votes than Ted. The other thing is, I beat Hillary, and I will give you the list. I beat Hillary in many of the polls that have been taken, and each week I get better and better, and believe me, I haven't even started on her yet.
Senator Rubio.
Let me tell you what this election is about for me. And I get all the delegate math and all that debate. Let me tell you what it's about for me. On Tuesday night, I didn't do as well, obviously, as I wanted to, and I was a little bit disappointed when I got home. And my wife told me a story that night, which is the reason why I can get up the next day and keep fighting. There's a gentleman here in South Florida who just got out of surgery, and his doctors told him he needs to be home resting. But every afternoon, he takes his little aluminum chair and he sits outside of an early polling center and holds a sign that says Marco Rubio. Because for him, I symbolize all the sacrifices that his generation made so their children could have a better life than themselves. That gentleman has not given up on me, and I am not going to give up on him. I am going to work tirelessly every single day because this election is too important. What's at stake is the future of this country. And I believe that at the end of this process, this nation will make the right choice. Because I've always believed that God has blessed America, that God's hand is upon this country, and that its greatest days are yet to come.
Thank you, Senator. Let's turn back to Stephen Dinan of the Washington Times. Stephen.
Mr. Trump, one of your biggest selling points is that you are largely self-funding your campaign.
Yes.
And you argue your opponents are controlled by their special interest donors. Will you maintain your pledge not to take outside contributions throughout the general election?
I have not made that decision yet. I will make a decision on that, but I have not made that decision yet. My decision was that I would go through the entire primary season, and I have turned down probably $275 million worth. I have many, many friends that come up all day long. 5 million, 10 million. I'm turning down money. I feel sort of foolish, to be honest with you. I don't know if I get any credit for it, but I'm self-funding my campaign. And other than, and by the way, other than very small donations where people are sending in $200, $15, $20, and we have some of that, but it's not a large amount. No, I'm self-funding my campaign. And the reason is that I've been in this business a long time, and I was on the other side until 8 months ago. I was on the other side. I made massive contributions, large contributions to politicians, both Democrats and Republicans. I was liked by everybody, which is an important thing. I will say this. people control special interests, lobbyists, donors. They make large contributions to politicians, and they have total control over those politicians. I don't want anybody to control me but the people right out there. And I'm going to do the right thing.
Senator Cruz, I want to come to you. The vast majority of Republicans and voters overall agree with Mr. Trump that candidates are beholden to people and groups who donate to their campaigns. Do you deny that those big donors do have influence?
Look, absolutely. And one of the things we're so frustrated about is the corruption, what I've called the Washington cartel. It's career politicians in both parties that get in bed with the lobbyists and special interests. And listen, Donald told you for 40 years he's been sitting at that table using his money to buy influence, supporting liberal Democrats like Hillary Clinton and John Kerry, but also supporting the Republican establishment and funding their effort to crush the Tea Party. And now his argument is, after 4 decades of being part of that influence buying, after Hillary Clinton spending decades being part of that influence selling, that suddenly he will change. But the interesting point is, tonight he hasn't pointed to a single special interest he's willing to take on. He didn't take on Wall Street when he supported the TARP bailout in Wall Street. He won't take on ethanol. And my campaign, by contrast, was funded by 1.1 million contributions all over this country.
I want to go to Mr. Trump for a
$62 at tedcruz.org.
Thank you, Senator.
That's who you got to be accountable to, the people.
Ted was given to PACs. I mean, PACs, you know, these super PACs are a disaster, by the way, folks. Very corrupt. It's going to lead to lots of disasters. But Ted has super PACs, and you have to look at the people that are giving to those super PACs, number one. It's very important to do that. There is total control of the candidates. I know it better than anybody that probably ever lived. And I will tell you this. I know the system far better than anybody else, and I know the system is broken. And I'm the one, because I know it so well, because I was on both sides of it. I was on the other side all my life. And I've always made large contributions. And frankly, I know the system better than anybody else, and I'm the only one up here that's going to be able to fix that system, because that system is wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Trump. Senator Rubio, I want to come to you with a question. At the last debate, you mocked Mr. Trump for being flexible. With so much gridlock in Washington, how can you expect to lead the country and get things done if you aren't willing to show flexibility?
Well, I think you can be flexible about ideas. You shouldn't be flexible about your principles. About when it comes to ideas and working with people, I have a record of having done that. Listen, on the issue of higher education, I'm the only one that continually talks about student loan debt, because I owed over $100,000 of student loan debt. So I know this is a major issue, and all my ideas that deal with higher education are bipartisan. The VA Accountability Act that I passed, I did it on a bipartisan basis. The sanctions that I imposed on Hezbollah, I did it on a bipartisan basis. The Girls Count Act, that deals with human trafficking, we did that on a bipartisan basis. But I also want to be frank. There are issues we're going to have an election over. When it comes to repealing and replacing Obamacare, that's not going to be bipartisan. When it comes to reducing the tax burdens on Americans, that's not going to be bipartisan. When it comes to shrinking the size of the federal bureaucracy, that's probably not going to be bipartisan. There are issues we can work together on, and we should. But there are fundamental issues about the proper role of government, and on those issues, I will fight anyone who wants to expand government, raise taxes, or weaken our military.
Mr. Trump, I want to give you a chance to respond, but specifically, you talked about flexibility, and one of the examples you gave was the height of the border fence. What are some of the other issues on which you're willing to show flexibility?
It depends on what comes up. You never know. It depends on what comes up. Look, we had a great president, Ronald Reagan. We had Tip O'Neill, Speaker. And what do? We take these two men that are very, very different men. They got along, they had relationships, and they got things done, and very beautifully. Nobody's complaining about the deals that Ronald Reagan made, and he made it with Tip O'Neill. We need to have people get together and work good deals out from our standpoint. And I'll tell you this, it can be done. We don't want to continue to watch people signing executive orders, because that was not what the Constitution and the brilliant designers of this incredible document had in mind. We need people that can make deals and can work. Because right now in Washington, there's total, absolute gridlock.
Thank you, sir. I want to go to Governor Kasich on this issue of flexibility, sir.